that one student's example and kind of now expands it to a whole generation, that student now is able to, just by graduating from high school, not even going to college, but graduate from high school, earn an additional $80,000 for his family over 10 years of employment. We think that's a lot of money. Those who actually complete a BA will earn somewhere over $250,000 more to come back into their community and their families over a 10-year period. So I know that in Aventa's work with the Chicago Public Schools and those 1,000 at-risk students we're going to talk about in one of our case studies a little later, if, say, 30% of those students actually went, they all graduated and 30% went on to get a bachelor's, we're talking an additional $134 million in higher salaries to be available to support their families over the next 10 years. And, you know, they're paying taxes, they're supporting their community with that money, they're keeping their families healthy, and they keep their families from being a drain on the community. It's a huge economic impact.
We received a question from one of the attendees, which I think is a nice segue into the next section. And it's asking us if we see any difference in student attention between static content, and they reference PowerPoint, you know, versus kinetic images or film and video, things that they can interact with more. Yeah, I think the short answer to that question is that if you were to survey, you know, 100 students that took our classes, they would absolutely talk about the engaging, interactive pieces of the classes. That's what really draws them to the class, keeps them coming back. Interactive games, video elements, incorporating clips from the internet that speak to the topical matter. So it's important, as I mentioned earlier, it's these kids, right? They know quality and they want quality, and if you can't offer it to them, they're gonna find it somewhere else.
They do that right in their personal lives. They spend their money that way. They listen to music and watch things that way.
Absolutely. And so when we're building curriculum, we are doing it with a primary goal of obviously being academically rigorous, but doing it in a way that keeps students engaged. So interactive elements are a very important piece of what we do.
Let me also mention, again, let me come back to my experience as a teacher and those teachers who are listening. They know when they get a really clever, interactive lesson going, the kids perk up. They all participate, including a couple of those children you thought that were never going to engage. But, you know, we've got millions of teachers trying to do that every night, and that is a really tough job. Whereas for online learning, we have some very talented curriculum designers who are master teachers, master curriculum designers. They are drawing from the best and putting out for example, it takes us a year to prepare a course, to build a course. And as a teacher preparing for tomorrow's lessons, I have a couple of hours. So I'm not going to be able to do as good a job as somebody whose full-time job is creating this library of clever, interesting, engaging, interactive ways to learn the same material that I will probably just end up talking about the next day. So why don't we move on and talk a little bit about our students.
Right, so to this point, we've taken a look at the responses of 500 students that are not engaged in virtual learning but are just active in a typical brick-and-mortar setting. So now we're going to take a look at the results of the survey based on students that are actually engaged in online learning. And so we have surveyed 326 of our students, and we're going to run through some of their responses and how that compares to their brick-and-mortar counterparts.
Great. We had about 300 plus of our students that we interviewed for this through the survey, and they gave us back their reactions so we can now compare them between traditional schools and students who were getting the vast majority of their instruction and curriculum online. And interestingly enough, despite, this is another myth buster, despite the belief that, oh, it's a blow-off, it's easy, I can hide, you know, it's not very personal, it's not very difficult. The online students are spending more time on homework every week than students in traditional schools. I think a big part of that is because it is pre-designed that way. So when you start the course, everything is designed in advance. Where if I'm a classroom teacher, I may have planned it, I may have to wing it, I may drop things because I'm out sick or there's a distraction of a fire drill or an assembly. But in an online curriculum, an online program, you are marching through that. Nothing gets omitted, nothing gets left out.
And Kathy, do you think that the 72% of the respondents, do you think that represents a wide spectrum of students in terms of their learning styles, their proficiency levels, or do you think that it's weighted more in one category of student?
I actually think that the beauty of what I've seen is it appeals to a huge range. Let's take a gifted and talented student who wants more challenge. They want to go fast. They want to move along. They want to mull over the parts that they really enjoy. They want to move quickly and accomplish the parts that they find less stimulating. And in a regular classroom, they are locked into a pace. So they may spend a whole week on something they find mind-numbing, and the piece that would have really captured their attention, it gets a 10-minute mention in one day. On the reverse, if you've got a student who is struggling, and we have lots of students who have come ill-prepared to high school, they are embarrassed, humiliated, they do not feel that they can do the work. And in a traditional classroom, they are likely to be, at best, asleep, and at worst, very disruptive. So by putting them online, they now control something, which is a great sense of power that you're in charge and you're not going to be embarrassed or humiliated. They get to set their own pacing. They get to review things over and over again until they get it and not have to raise their hand and be embarrassed by that. And as we said earlier, they also get to perform and not be ribbed by their friends for trying to show off for the teacher.
And we'll touch on this in subsequent slides, but you know, let's not forget the valuable role of the teacher, right? I mean, I think the reason that 72% of these kids are spending 3 or more hours on homework versus a lower percentage of students in traditional schools is that they're in a more nurtured environment, right? They're free of peer pressure. It's really, you know, they're racing against themselves.
And they can contact their teacher when they have a problem.
Right. And their teacher's responsive and nurturing.
Yeah, instead of waiting till the next day or a week later, they actually can pick up the phone and make a phone call or send an instant message or an email. And we've got teachers available off hours, which is basically when you're doing your homework if you're in a traditional classroom and even for online students. So that ability to reach out when you are struggling is there, as well as the ability of the teacher to reach in and approach you when you are struggling.